Today, we're diving into something pretty fascinating, affects almost everyone, I'd say. Business, personal life. Just everyday chats, really. How to recognize a liar. Get ready, because we've got some really insightful stuff on, nonverbal cues and human behavior. Okay, so first off, how often are people actually lying? Like you or me or anyone. The stats are, well, they're kind of eye-opening.
They really are. Studies suggest the average person tells maybe around 10 lies a day.
10? Wow. Okay, but wait, before we all get suspicious.
Right, exactly. A lot of these are what we call white lies,
They're like, I'm fine when you're really not.
Precisely. Just small stuff to maybe sidestep a long conversation or avoid hurting feelings. But here's where it gets really interesting. The average person gets lied to somewhere between 10 and, gets this, maybe up to 200 times a day.
200? How?
No. It depends a lot on how social you are, your job, things like that. Now, most are probably tiny, insignificant. But some lies, they can have a huge impact. Your career, maybe closing a deal, or, really important relationships.
Right. So that's our mission today, then, to equip you, the listener, with the tools to spot those moments, the ones that actually matter.
That's the goal. Because understanding this can be really powerful. And it's kind of a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
We get lied to all the time. And the key thing for recognizing deception, the core idea, is that for most people, lying is, it's stressful. We're not talking about pathological liars here. That's a whole different category, very small percentage.
Right.
But for the vast majority of us, making up a story and delivering it, it causes real internal discomfort, like a conflict inside.
And that stress, it has to go somewhere.
Exactly. It often leaks out, manifests itself through these involuntary nonverbal signals. It's like the body is unconsciously reacting to that inner tension.
So if lying is stressful, is that because, our brains are just wired for truth and deception takes more work? And how does that discomfort actually show up?
Oh, yeah.
What are these telltale signs? Let's get into those nonverbal cues.
Yeah. Okay. So first up, you have what we call self-soothing or discomfort gestures.
Self-soothing, like calming yourself down.
Pretty much, yeah. When someone's feeling that stress from lying, they often do specific physical things, almost unconsciously trying to, manage it. Like you might see them rubbing their nose, not just a quick scratch, but a distinct kind of repetitive rub.
Okay, I think I know what you mean.
Or rubbing their eyes, touching or scratching their neck a lot. That's a classic sign of unease.
The neck scratch, yeah.
You might even see someone pulling at their collar, like they feel choked up or need a bit more air because of the discomfort.
Wow.
Other things too, scratching an ear, pulling an earlobe, maybe rubbing their hand, even biting their lip. They're often unconscious attempts to maybe mask the discomfort, but ironically, they actually tend to highlight it. The body's trying to cope.
Okay, so they're not just random fidgets, they're signals, distress signals leaking out. What else? I think you mentioned something about creating barriers.
That's right. Another category, people often unconsciously put up physical barriers between themselves and the person they're talking to.
Yeah.
Especially when they're being untruthful.
Why is that? What's the psychology there?
It seems to tap into a really deep, unconscious desire for, self-protection, putting distance between you and the perceived threat of being caught.
Makes sense. So what does that look like?
Well, a classic one is covering the mouth.
Yeah.
Almost literally trying to stop the lie from coming out or hide it, like the speak no evil monkey.
Oh, right.
Crossing arms is another very common one, just creating that physical shield.
Okay.
Or you might see them placing objects, a phone, maybe a coffee cup, a book between themselves and you. A literal separation, a shield.
Now this next one sounds really intriguing. The micro smile. Or a tick. What is that exactly?
Ah, yes. That's a fascinating one. It's this very brief, almost impossible to catch involuntary smile. It flashes across a liar's face right after they've told a significant lie.
Right after, so like a little burst of...
Well, the theory is that the brain's emotion center reacts quicker than the part that's busy constructing the lie.
Okay.
So for just a split second, there's this tiny flicker of maybe relief or sort of got away with it feeling. A tiny celebration almost.
Wow.
And then they quickly suppress it. But that fleeting moment, if you catch it, can be a really powerful indicator. It's a glimpse of the raw emotional reaction before the conscious control kicks back in.
That's incredible. A real unconscious tell. Okay, so moving beyond the physical stuff, liars often use specific verbal tactics too, right? Ways they talk.
Oh, absolutely. Verbal strategies are very common. One big one is simply dodging the question.
Dodging. How so?
Instead of a direct answer, they might divert, change the subject entirely, or give you information that's totally irrelevant.
Ah, like when you ask a kid, why did you knock that vase over? And they say, I can pick it up.
Exactly like that. The impulse is the same, even in adults. Avoid the core issue, the uncomfortable truth.
Okay. What else?
Another one is over-explanation, giving way too much unnecessary detail.
Why would they do that? Wouldn't that make them seem more suspicious?
You'd think so, but they often believe it makes their story sound more credible, more fleshed out. But it usually just highlights the deception. For example, you ask, did you steal the money? An untruthful person might say, I didn't steal the money from the wallet.
Ah, adding that extra bit from the wallet when you didn't even specify where.
Precisely. It's an attempt to overload you with detail, distract you, make the invented story seem more elaborate and, they hope, more believable.
That's a clever, well, not so clever trick. And speaking of stories, you mentioned something about a chronological trap.
Yes, invented stories are usually built step by step, chronologically. A leads to B leads to C.
Because that's how you'd construct it.
Right. So a really powerful technique, police use it a lot, is asking the person to tell the story backward.
From the end to the beginning.
Exactly. C, then B, then A. Most people telling a lie will struggle massively. They might completely lose the thread because they didn't experience it that way. They just built it forward.
That makes sense. So how can, regular people use that? We can't exactly interrogate our colleagues.
No, but you can adapt it. Ask non-chronological questions. Jump around in their story. Ask about a small detail from the end, then something from the middle, then maybe the beginning.
Mix it up.
Yeah, it can really trip up someone who's relying on a rehearsed, linear, invented narrative. And another verbal tell, a really common one, is repeating the question back to you before answering.
Oh, like stalling.
Exactly. It buys them time. So if you ask, did you take the car keys? They might reply, did I take the car keys? No, of course I didn't take the keys.
Right. Often with a slight change in tone, too, maybe a bit defensive.
Often, yes. Defensive, or just needing those extra few seconds to think up the lie. They might also just use way more words than necessary, or speak in a style that feels off, especially if you know the person well. Doesn't sound like them.
Okay, this brings up a big one, something everyone thinks they know about lie detection. Eye contact. We've all heard liars can't look you in the eye. Is that actually true?
Ah, the eye contact myth is probably one of the biggest misconceptions.
Really?
Yeah, it likely comes from watching kids, who often do look away when they're uncomfortable telling a lie. It's almost instinctive.
Okay.
But for adults, it's often the opposite. Normal, comfortable eye contact during a conversation might be, 40% to 60% of the time? Somewhere in that range.
Sounds about right.
Liars, however, trying hard to seem honest, might actually make excessive eye contact.
More eye contact.
Yeah, like staring. Direct, unblinking, maybe holding your gaze for longer than feels natural. It's a conscious effort to project sincerity. Like, see? I'm looking right at you. I must be telling the truth.
So intense staring could actually be a red flag. That's counterintuitive.
It really can be. It's an overcompensation.
What about those really specific eye movements? Like looking up and to the right or something like that. I've heard theories.
Right, the NLP-type eye accessing cues. There
Yeah.
is research on that. For instance, the idea that glancing upright might access visual imagination constructing an image,
Okay.
or looking level right might access creating sounds. So potentially someone might do that just before telling a visual or auditory lie.
But I sense a but coming.
There's a big but, or maybe several. First, these are incredibly subtle. Second, and this is crucial, it's mostly studied and potentially applicable to right-handed people.
Ah, so left-handed people might be different.
Exactly. Brain organization can vary. The cues might be reversed or just not reliable at all for left-handers. So unless you know someone's handedness and are really trained to spot these super subtle, fleeting glances,
It's probably not the most reliable thing for everyday use.
far less reliable than the bigger behavioral clusters and verbal cues we've been talking about. It's easy to misinterpret those eye movements.
Okay, so we have all these potential signs, the self-soothing, the barriers, those micro-smiles, the verbal tricks, even the weird eye contact. It feels like a lot to keep track of. How do you actually put it all together without accusing someone just because they, scratched their ear?
That is absolutely the key question. Because misinterpretation is so easy. And that's why there are two golden rules. Absolutely crucial for accurately spotting deception.
Okay, rule number one.
Rule number one, Look for clusters, not isolated signs.
Clusters.
Yes, a single sign on its own means basically nothing. Someone rubs their nose. Could just be an itch. Someone crosses their arms. Maybe they're cold.
Right.
You need to see a group of these signs happening together, 2, 3, maybe more, in fairly quick succession, linked to the potential lie. One sign should just make you pay closer attention, like an aha, let me watch this moment.
But not proof.
Definitely not proof. A cluster of signs, though, that becomes a much stronger indicator. It's about the pattern.
Got it. Look for clusters, not just one thing. It makes perfect sense. What's rule number 2?
Rule number 2, timing is everything.
Time.
The signs of deception you observe, the cluster of signs, must occur within a very specific, very short time frame.
How short?
Within about 5 seconds of the critical question being asked. That window includes signs that might even start while you're asking the question and extends for about 5 seconds after they hear it or start to answer.
Only 5 seconds.
Roughly, yes. Any gestures, fidgets, verbal weirdness that happens after that 5-second window. It's much more likely to be random, coincidental, unrelated to the stress of the question or the lie itself.
I see. So the reaction has to be pretty immediate.
It has to be closely tied in time to the trigger of the question. Without applying these 2 rules, clusters and timing, you're really just guessing, and you risk accusing innocent people based on, random behavior. These rules filter out so much noise.
Okay, wow. We've really taken a deep dive here into, well, the pretty tricky world of lie detection. From body language, subtle stuff, to the verbal cues, eye contact surprises, and crucially, those 2 golden rules,
Right.
Clusters and timing. This knowledge feels genuinely useful. It's something you can apply in work, personal life, just understanding interactions better.
It can be incredibly valuable, definitely. But maybe a word of caution is needed too. Just because you can spot these signs doesn't mean every lie needs a big reaction or a confrontation. Remember those white lies we talked about?
It's the small stuff.
Yeah, many lies are basically harmless, maybe even necessary sometimes for social grace. The goal here isn't really to become some kind of human lie detector, pointing fingers all the time.
That sounds exhausting anyway.
It would be. No, the idea is more about empowering you to recognize the important lies. The ones that could genuinely affect your career, your key relationships, or, critical decisions you need to make.
And that's really where the rubber meets the road, isn't it? Recognizing a significant lie, that's one thing. But then the real challenge starts. Once you have that knowledge, once you suspect something important isn't true, how do you choose to react? What does your response say about your own boundaries, your values, how you navigate those tricky situations? That's maybe the deeper question to mull over long after this deep dive ends.